Has homesteading become a chore instead of something you enjoy? Are you overwhelmed with daily tasks and lack of progress? It is understandable to feel demotivated when it comes to homesteading, but don't give up just yet. In this episode, I want to share with you some things that have held me back and have caused worry and slowed my motivation. But I'm also going to explore ways that you can reignite your passion and how to stay motivated so you don't have to quit homesteading. Let's get growing. Hello and welcome to the Purposeful Plant Podcast, the show that talks about growing a garden, a homestead, a healthy family, and most importantly, growing closer to God. I'm your host, Crystal Media, owner of the Red Ridge Farm Homestead, where our mission is to help women of faith find the courage to grow healthy food for their family while building a closer relationship with our Lord and Savior. That's you. Don't let the world hold you back. Pray, just plant. Hello, fellow growers, and welcome to the Pray Just Plant podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Media, and today, in Season 12, Episode 3, we're going to be talking about motivation. We're going to be talking about having that feeling that you just want to quit homesteading. I know I've had the feeling. I'm sure you've had it too. Things happen. Homesteading's not all smiles and giggles. There's some hard truths that happen during homesteading. And today we're going to talk about those. And we're going to talk about how it's okay to feel those feelings. We're going to talk about how we can manage that and how we can break through our overwhelm and stay motivated even in the hardest of times. This episode is just a short little tidbit, but if you are on the purposeful growing journey and you are diving into those stages, this episode is for those of you that are in the homestead stage. It could be really for anyone in all of the 6 stages of the purposeful growing journey. But what are those 6 stages? Well, the first one is just grow. This is where you're finding your why. This is when you're finding your motivation to begin, to start. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Then there's the kitchen stage, the purposeful kitchen. This is where you're learning to cook the food, because isn't it our goal to cook really good food, even if it's to grow food and to build a homestead and all the things? Isn't it still that we grow those things and take care of those animals so that we can produce good food for our family? That's the main goal. So you should be starting in your kitchen, and you can start there without land. Then there's the purposeful home. Sometimes we think that this isn't part of the homestead, but it is. It's right there in the middle of the word, home. The home is where we find the motivation. It's also where we find strategies to help us get out of the home into the outside and get things done out there as well. It also is where we create a sustainable home for our family so that they can be joyful and have less stress. And we can have less stress as well. Then there's the purposeful garden. This is where we're going outside and we're learning how to grow in the garden. And if you're in that stage, then you might be starting a garden, or you might have been growing for a few years in a garden, but you want to add more, like permaculture and all of those things. Next is the purposeful homestead. This is where you're adding animals to your homestead. Now, all of these don't have to be in order. This is just the order that I have them. And if you are starting out, this is a great order to go through these stages from beginning to end. The last stage is the purposeful life. This is where you are doing all the things, because we still need to be in the kitchen as well as on the homestead, as well as in the garden, as well as in the home, as well as continuing to make goals every single year. So this is a journey that we can take, especially if you're just starting out, but it also reminds us that we can be growing in each of these areas if we've been growing for years. So if you want to dive into the purposeful growing journey, I have a web page that will break it down for you. It'll tell you what stage you should be in, what actions you should have accomplished to move on to the next stage, and so much more. I also have access to resources there and directs you to certain blog posts and podcast episodes that can help you in that area. But if you are in the homestead stage, then you are here to listening to this episode. So let's get in. Homesteading is something that is different. Homesteading is something that is sometimes completely out of our control. Homesteading is something that we feel that should be in our control, but it just can't be in different aspects, especially when we're getting outside and growing and doing things that is completely in God's control. He has control over the weather. Right now, here in Wyoming, we are getting a cold snap. It's the middle of October. Yeah, we do get cold weather. But right now, yesterday was 65 degrees, and right now it's like 15 degrees. degrees outside. We have gotten a big drop in temperature, and that was something that I could not control. And sometimes there are things like in the weather that we can't control, like a hailstorm that completely wiped out my garden a few years ago. I think it's been over 5 or 6 years ago. After that day, I really struggled to get my motivation back. And in this episode, that's what I want to talk about a little bit, is that motivation to keep homesteading. Sometimes we do feel like we want to quit, and still that's okay. Homesteading is hard. Sometimes we romanticize it. We think that it's not hard, but it is. Every aspect of it is. Adding animals to your land, having a responsibility to take care of those animals, having something happen to those animals that you didn't even know what it was or how it happened or any of the things. Taking on responsibility comes with hardship. It comes with working hard as well. And sometimes that working hard can take us by surprise. It can also overwhelm us. It can also be something that maybe we really didn't sign up for. But homesteading can bring so many other benefits as well. Working hard can teach our kids responsibility. Working hard can teach us responsibility. Working hard can teach us fortitude and gratitude to the Lord for the things that do work out. There's so many things that we can learn and grow with when we start a homestead. But there are moments. And that's what this episode's about. There are moments that we don't feel like we want to keep going, that we want to quit. So let's talk about those feelings. And let's talk about how they're okay, because they are. There's going to be times, I know I've had times throughout my homesteading journey of 20 plus years. I'm not trying to age myself here, but yeah, I've been doing this for a while and things happen. In fact, this year I had another shock that completely blew my 5-year plans out the window, completely devastating. It hurt my heart. In that moment, I said it was okay to feel those feelings, to feel hurt, to feel discouraged, to feel really mad and pissed off, to cry and to scream. I felt those things, and it was okay to feel those things. But in the next instance, it wasn't. I needed to make a plan. I needed to make a solution. I had babies depending on me, and I didn't know what to do. So yes, it's okay to feel those feelings of pain and frustration, but sometimes we can't just continually dwell in them. What I'm talking about is that I lost one of my dairy girls this year. She gave birth on, it was a Tuesday, and she was gone by Friday. That's how quickly she left. And she had 3 beautiful little babies, and when she left, I didn't know what to do. I had to find a solution to support these babies. Thankfully, I had another goat in milk that she'd been in milk for over a year, so I had milk to feed the other babies, and thankfully, they were on her for 3 days and they got all the colostrum they needed. I, in fact, have a bunch of colostrum frozen from her. But it was a shock. It was a hard thing to deal with. It was something that really, really hurt my soul. And in that moment, in that instant, I said, why? Why am I doing this to myself? Why did this happen? I knew it was God's plan, but you still have those feelings. You still have them. And that's okay to have them. It's okay to be frustrated and pissed off and hurt to the core when things happen and shock you like that. But we also have to say that they need, which is my next point, they need to be managed. Sometimes difficult emotions can get in our way. Sometimes we can feel depressed or sad for a few days after something like that happens, but I couldn't. In that moment, I couldn't feel that because I saw those little babies and I knew I had to get out of it. I cried for about an hour. I was in complete frustration and I can't even explain my feelings there. But I knew that I had to keep going. I had to manage those difficult emotions because I had little lives depending on me. And I also had my kids watching me. Have you ever felt that? That you know there's something that you really want to just wallow in. You really want to give in to them, right? You want to feel depressed and annoyed and all the things, but then you look over and you see your child watching you and you realize, I can't do that. I can't be that person. I have to be strong. And it was okay for me to feel those feelings for a little bit, but now I need to manage them. Now I need to manage those difficult emotions and I need to move forward. I need to find out a plan. How am I going to feed these babies? What am I going to do? What emotions am I going to put forward now so that my kids can see that, yeah, it's okay to feel angry and frustrated, but it's also not okay to stay there. You have to change your emotions. You have to change your point of view. years ago when that hailstorm wiped out my garden, it was hard. It was devastating. It was something that I never thought would ever happen to me in that moment. I mean, it has happened before, and I'd have neighbors talk about their garden being wiped out, and all of those examples. I mean, you read them in stories, you read them everywhere about bad things happening on the homestead. That devastation came to me. It was later in the season. Everything was right almost at peak to be harvested. I had tomatoes in the garden. I had so many things in the garden ready to be harvested, and I had to stand at the window and I had to just let it happen. It was so hard. It was really, really hard to be in that position, in that moment of strife. It was during that winter, I was still struggling with these feelings. I was really, that hit me harder than anything. And I think it taught me something that I could do this year when I lost Goldie, my dairy goat, that it taught me how to persevere. It taught me how to face those hard feelings and accept them and know that they're okay, but also to move forward. So I wrote a poem that year. It says here on my blog that I updated this in 2020, but I think I wrote this in 2019. This is when the Lord was really pulling on my heart that maybe I needed to start sharing these experiences. Maybe I needed to be a voice of someone that could help others get through these feelings. And the Lord laid this poem on my heart. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read it to you. I will put it in the show notes as well. It's up on my blog, and it's actually, if you listen closely, it even is where I got the name for this podcast. So this poem is called Pray, Just Plant. And I'm going to try to get through it without choking up, hopefully. I've already done it a couple times, but hopefully I can get through it and really show you how I can manage my emotions. Pray, just plant. A gardener's heart shivers in the dormant world. It asks, when will spring arrive? Will it ever? It yearns for something green. It thinks, pray, just plant. A gardener's heart feels the lengthening of the day. It begs for an end to the cold. It hopes for the first bird's song. It utters, pray, just plant. A gardener's heart warmed by the Chinook wind. Its weight is getting shorter, harder. It wills the green to show. It whispers, pray, just plant. A gardener's heart rejoices in the spring. It loves the smell of dirt. It drills the seeds of hope. It hums, pray, just plant. A gardener's heart drinks in the sun. It marvels at the strength. It relishes the sight of shoots growing. It sings, pray, just plant. A gardener's heart tires in the heat. It hopes for a harvest. It sees the thunderclouds. It quivers, pray, just plant. A gardener's heart worries, dreads the storm. It frets at the smell of ice. It awaits the coming doom. It stammers, pray, just plant. A gardener's heart aches at the sight. It experiences the failure, acknowledges the pain. It cries, pray, just plant. A gardener's heart withered from the storm. It gives up. It shudders. It dies. It sees life start again. It screams, pray, just plant. So if you go to my blog and read this poem and find the picture that is attached to it, it's a picture of the devastation. But the center of it is not the devastation. It was a sunflower that survived. And it was this picture of the devastation and this sunflower that really pushed me to write this poem about a gardener's heart. It talks about that feeling that we have in the winter when we can't wait for spring to come so we can get out into the soil. But then it ends with that dreaded hailstorm that hit my garden. But that wasn't the end. It is a very short line. But the very last line is, it sees life starting again. That's the awesome thing about homesteading and growing and being out in nature and being in God's area is that things regrow. Devastation can happen, but that doesn't stop God's plan. That doesn't stop God's continuance. And I hope that you enjoyed that poem, but also just see the reality of it, that there is a continuation. Even after the storm, even after devastation, there was a continuation. Because right now, even though I lost Goldie, right now stands her daughter in her stall, and I have a continuation. I have a future. I have her in a little tiny package again, and it's amazing. So what are some other things that we can do to be motivated? How can we break out of those emotions? So I talked about a little, it's okay to have those emotions, but we can't just stay in them, right? We need to manage them. So how can we manage them? How can we manage those emotions? So we need to set realistic goals. One way that we deal with the hard, or when we deal with things not working out our way, sometimes it can be a devastating loss, that something is completely out of our control, like me losing my dairy goat this year and the storm. But sometimes hardships on the homestead don't happen because of something happening. Sometimes they happen because of our mindset, of how we perceive things, how we look at situations. And that's how we can change those deep feelings when something does happen. But we need to realize that we have control of our mindset. That's the only thing we have control of when we homestead and we grow our own food and are out in nature. So we need to set realistic goals. And sometimes we can set ourselves up for failure when we don't do this. When we set extravagant goals and we start getting down on ourselves because we're not accomplishing in them. Sometimes we need to step back and say, was this goal realistic? What can I do that can be different? And maybe it's changing things up. Maybe it's changing that goal up so that it's something that can be accomplished and is realistic for you. And we need to really change our mindset. We need to be focusing on creating a mindset of peace, a mindset of looking for the good things. Because when we have a hard day, when we are stuck in the trenches of the hard, sometimes we need to remember that we also need to look to the good. We need to be looking at those things so that we can do the next thing, my next point, which is to rekindle your passions. In the Purposeful Growing journey, the first thing I have people that want to start out on this journey do when becoming a homesteader or wanting to develop a homestead is to set goals, but also to find their why. Why are you doing this? Your why can really rekindle your purpose and your passion. So when I sat down and after the devastation of losing Goldie and the devastation of the garden, or when I sat down and look at my list of things that didn't get done this year, and I told you what the weather was like, it's freezing outside. There's not going to be any more fences built. There's not going to be any more things on my to-do list that are going to get done before the snow starts to fly. And I have to accept those things. And I can be sad about them, but I also need to rethink them. I also need to be looking at about what's the next thing that I can do. I need to set more goals, or I need to tangent, especially with my dairy goats. My 5-year plan was I bought a dairy goat and she's 11 years old. I bought her when she was 6. So 7 years ago, because she didn't breed the first year. And when I got her bred, the first thing I wanted to do was I invested in some semen so that I could AI her artificially inseminate, because we don't have buck. We don't really have a lot of La Manchas here in Wyoming. So this was something that I could do. But my plan is that she was going to be my foundation doe. And I was going to breed her this year to one strain of semen that I got. And then in the next 2 years, I was going to breed her to the other side. And I was going to follow these 2 branches off from her genealogy pool and build them up and figure out which one was the best. Which one would have had the better taste of milk. Which one will produce more, which one will fit into my plans as a dairy farmer. I'm someone who wants to only breed my girls every other year. So I want a doe that's going to produce a large amount of milk, but also continue to produce milk in a longer time than maybe other dairy goats will. I've worked through that plan, and I had to remind myself when this thing happened that I'm still working through this plan. I have a plan that will get me through this situation. So I bred Amber. This is the foundation doe that I'm talking about. I bred her to Golden Ace. He has a longer name than that. But that's where Goldie and Ginger came from. So I bred them. I kept them for the year. I bred them to a buck that was a local buck. And I wasn't looking to really build their foundation yet. I wanted to see what these 2 girls could do. They both came into milk. Ginger, right away, she just didn't have the supply that Goldie did. She also didn't have the tit formation that Goldie had. And she continued to dry herself off. In fact, I had to rebreed her that year, where Goldie fit into my program. She was something that I wanted. She was something that I wanted to push forward in my program. So I sold Ginger. And she made a great goat for someone else. She just didn't fit into my program. Goldie, I bred her this year or last year to a better buck, and she had two beautiful dolings and a buck. And the first breeding that she had another doling, and her name was Honey. And I have Honey because I wanted to make sure that when I was getting rid of Ginger, I wanted to make sure that I still had two from this line. So I kept Honey. Her full name is Red Ridge Snow-Kissed Honey. And then I have Ginny now. But anyways, I bred Goldie, and it was a better breeding. It was something where I really wanted to keep something from her because I knew she had potential, and I wanted to continue this potential in her so that we could build on her, because not only did she keep in milk longer. My husband, I'm not a big milk drinker. The reason I milk dairy goats is not for myself, it's for my family because they are big milk drinkers. But he said her milk was tastier. It was sweeter. And Honey came into milk this year, her first daughter, and he said her milk is even tastier and even sweeter. So I know I have something in that line. Now, sadly, I have lost Goldie, but I have her daughters. It was a local buck for my other line that I have. And my plan was to develop that side, and I have a second frozen semen saved that I wanted to give to the next generation after I decide which side I want to build up. But with this setback with Goldie being lost, because I was going to breed Goldie to Marcel, that's this other buck that I had, because I liked her milk. She had great potential. She had all of these things working for her. So I was going to breed her next year. It would have been 2 years from now to this Marcel buck. But now I'm set back, but I still do have the Marcel buck. I chose this year to breed Amber. She's just now she'll be 11 this next year when I breed her. Bred her to the Marcel buck. So now that I will have 3 strands coming down of different bucks to figure out which ones I like more. I had that plan, and I had a solution inside that plan that helped me change things up. So you need to change your mindset. You need to look at your goals that you already had and just continue with them. And that gets into that last part. You need to track your progress. So those things that could have set me back, that really felt hard and difficult, if I wouldn't have been tracking my progress, if I wouldn't have seen how far we have come, that yes, it was really sad losing Goldie, but I do have a plan. I do have a plan moving forward, and it's still going to fulfill the goals that I had. I'm a little bit more okay with it. It still really hurts, but in other things as well, when we track our progress, and I really encourage you to do a end of year audit. This episode is coming out in October. I'm going to be doing an audit, but you go through your things. Did you do what you said you were going to do? Did any goals happen? Did you have some good things that happened, some bad things that happened? Go over those things and look at the progress that you've made. Maybe some places you had some setbacks, but maybe you had some places where you soared. Maybe you had some places that you really moved forward. So by looking at your progress, you can really rekindle your passion by looking at your why, by looking at your progress. So I want to tell you right now, if you're listening to this episode and you have those feelings of, I'm just not motivated anymore, and maybe I want to quit, I want you just to take some time. 1, let yourself experience those feelings. It's okay. Don't keep telling yourself not to feel them. This isn't what you should be doing. You shouldn't be feeling this way. I'm going to tell you right now, it's okay to feel that way, but only feel that way for a little bit of time. Start managing those difficult emotions and look back at your goals. Can you tangent? Can you be doing something different? Is the reason you're feeling this way because you didn't set realistic goals? And go back to your why. Rekindle your passion by going back to your why and looking at your progress, looking at how far you have come. Homesteading can be often overwhelming, leading to loss of motivation and desire to quit. But by understanding that you have the control over your mind, even though sometimes you don't feel like you have control over what's happening on your homestead, you have a control over who you are. And that's not even just in homesteading. You have control of who you are, your actions, your thoughts, and what you do. That's in your control. And when you lean on the Lord for strength and He guides you, you can overcome these feelings and you can move forward. I hope you enjoyed the poem and where the name of Pray Just Plant podcast came from. Maybe that was something that you were wondering about. But when I look into that poem and those words, to pray means that I lean on the Lord. That's the first thing we should do when anytime something like this happens. The first thing we should be doing is going to the Lord and praying about it and consulting Him. But also the other side, true. Whenever we want to do something new on the homestead, we should be praying about it. But we also need to not have the mindset of like, oh, I can't do this. Oh, maybe this isn't the right thing. Oh, I shouldn't do it. That's the just plant part. If you've prayed about it and you know this is what you should be doing, you just have to start. You have to plant the seed. A seed not planted will never grow. Always just pray and just plant. Pray Just Plant. I want to thank you for joining me here in this episode of the Pray Just Plant podcast. And if you're new here, I want to welcome you to the Red Ridge Farm Fellowship of Fellow Growers. Be sure to check out the Purposeful Growing page to help you get on your growing journey and find purpose. Again, thank you for joining me. And as always, don't let the world hold you back. Pray Just Plant. This week's episode is brought to you by the Planning Beyond the Harvest Handbook. This handbook was designed to help you get your harvest onto your family's plates. We grow all this delicious food, and sometimes in the garden planning, we forget about the harvest and beyond the harvest. This workbook will walk you through the 5 steps that I use to get beyond the harvest. You can grab your copy at redridgefarm.org/resources.